accuracy in a DC is typically already around 99%. And it's exactly 3 o'clock my time, which means it's time for this webinar to start. I hope everyone can hear me well. And we want to welcome you to today's webinar on RFID myths debunked, where we will answer some of the questions we often hear when it comes to RFID. And we will try to answer them as well as possible, of course, to make you understand why these are myths. And this is the second webinar out of a series called RFID in Retail. And we started this series because we are living in uncertain times, and we definitely cannot take these uncertainties away for you. But what we can do is share our knowledge and experience around RFID so that you can make well-informed decisions now about the technology, but also in the future, and can really see where it adds benefits to you. And before we start, I would like to quickly introduce myself and the other two experts on this webinar. So I'll start with myself today. I'm Steffi Broere. I am a Global Customer Success Manager at NetApp, which means I want to make sure our customers understand our RFID software proposition and can make use of it to their benefit as well as possible. So I guide them through that process and I make sure they know exactly how it works. And then I want to invite the first expert we have today to introduce herself, which is Madeline. Madeline, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. My name is Madeline Loria. I'm an account executive at NetApp Retail and headquarters in Boston. So I'm working with retailers to really outline their RFID deployment strategy and also help them to build a business case so that they can see an ROI from RFID.
Thank you, Madeline. And last but not least, we have Danny on today's panel. Danny, could you also give a brief introduction of yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Haak. I'm responsible for product management inside NetApp Retail, which basically means that with my team, we set the product strategy and also the product roadmap for all of the products that we develop. Of course, together with our client customers, we look at technology trends and market trends. So thanks for joining. Hope we can learn you something today.
Thank you very much, Danny. And we are your today's Mythbusters. So we'll make sure that these myths are forever out of your way in making decisions about RFID. And we have a few house rules for today. First of all, the content of this webinar will take about 30 minutes, after which we will have time for a Q&A. You can already ask all your questions throughout this webinar by using the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. So you can send out any questions about any topic that we will cover, but we save them for the end of this webinar to discuss them all together. And we will have some polls popping up throughout this webinar. So when you see a poll popping up, please hit the answer that is most related to your opinion. And the recordings of these webinars will be shared with you tomorrow via a follow-up email, and they will also be on our website. And if you're enjoying this webinar or this webinar series, please feel free to like them and share them with colleagues to whom you think they might also be very relevant to join. So that's most of the practicalities. Then let's look at which myth we will dive into today. First, we want to explain why you do not necessarily need to start in the DC with your deployment. Then we will dive into why an RFID deployment does not have to take forever. We will give you more insights onto the issues around privacy and how you can mitigate them. And we will explain the cost aspects of RFID. And we are all from NetApp, and at NetApp we have a lot of experience with RFID, especially RFID in retail. And we want to make sure that in this time we share that knowledge with you so that you can make informed decisions around this technology. So having said that, I think it's time to dive into the first myth of today, which is an RFID deployment needs to start in the DC. And this webinar series was started with a webinar about the DC and why RFID can be of great benefit in the DC. But do you really need to start in the DC? A lot of people think so. And we want to ask you today why you think you should start in RFID in the DC. So there should be a poll on your screen right now with the following answers. 1, implementation should follow the flow of goods. You believe RFID should start in DC because RFID can help save on labor cost. It might help to register goods outbound and have that as a necessity for store operations. Or the answer could be, I would not start in my DC. We'll give you a couple more seconds to fill out this poll. I see some people are still filling out the poll, so we take a couple more seconds. And let's end this poll and share the results with you. So a lot of people already believe that they should not start in the DC. Well, then we will hopefully be in line with what you're thinking. But a lot of people also still believe that it can help on saving labor costs and that it's necessary for in-store operations. So let's dive deeper into that. A lot of people believe that RFID is simply an automation technology. And that makes sense if you reason from its origin, where it was mainly used to replace barcode. But RFID has much more benefits than barcode technology. It allows for bulk reading, you can read from a distance, no optical contact is needed, and you can store more data on an RFID label. And that is why RFID can be used in more processes with more ease. But that doesn't fully explain yet why you should start in the store rather than the DC. Given that explanation, we often look at the degree of chaos. Looking at the DC, we see that the DC is actually quite accurate already. So the accuracy in a DC is typically already around 99% or even higher. In the store, there is a lot less accuracy. So the accuracy in stores is typically around 60 to 70%, which means there is still a lot of inaccuracy, a lot of chaos. And there's one simple explanation for that, namely the DC is a very controlled environment, while the stores are something you cannot fully control of one main factor, because there are a lot of customers coming in and out. And of course, there are a lot of processes that are not the same from day to day. So there simply is more chaos and there are more inaccuracies, leading to more benefit or easier to reach benefits when you start deploying in the store. You can go from 70 to 100%, while in the DC you can only go from 99 to 100%. So more benefits can be obtained in the store. And RFID will help you in making fully visible what you have in store, reaching that 100% accuracy. So it sheds light into the darkest black box. Looking at the other side of the coin, we look at effort to implement RFID. And there we also see that the DC can be quite challenging, because for the DC you need a customized solution, and you often need to add an exception handling station. And that requires quite some effort to obtain that small benefit that you can get. That doesn't mean you should not start in your DC. DC is also a great point to implement RFID in, but it might be better to start in stores, where you can have a standard process that applies to all of your stores with quick and ready to use hardware and software that immediately allows you to get a big benefit, reaching the higher percentage. So you can have 20% of the effort with 80% of the benefit. And that's why we say it's a good option to start in your stores and then move to your DCs afterwards. If you have more questions on this topic, you can use the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. And before we answer those, we will have some more myths to cover today. So for the next myth, I want to give the stage to Madeline, who will guide you through the RFID deployment and explain why RFID does not take forever to deploy anymore.
Thanks, Steffi. So before we get started, I just want to launch another poll, ask you guys, what do you believe is the key limiting factor of an RFID deployment? So by limiting factor, we mean, what do you think takes the longest or slows you down? So some options could be your internal IT readiness. It could be gathering an internal project team. Maybe it's training the store and getting the store team engaged in the project. Is it your RFID software deployment? Or is it gathering all of the hardware that's necessary or needed to engage in the deployment across your entire organization? So we'll give you a couple of seconds here. I see some answers coming in. Great. So I think that this is typically a concern for a lot of retailers when they're just entering into a project. They really want to better understand their timeline and what's going to take their longest. So let's share those results with you guys. Internal IT readiness with 43%. So I think that that is in line with what we typically see when we ask this question. IT readiness is definitely an overworked team within the organization. But let's dive into this a little bit more. Oh, first I wanted to show you guys a brief video of our great Tom Buiger. You might have seen him on last week's webinar. But here he's holding one of our older, chunkier RFID readers. This was about 10 years ago. So this is relevant because I want to talk about where we came from. So when we look at deployment and RFID taking forever, it's really important to look at the past to where we are now. And when we're talking about the past, we're talking 5-10 years ago. This is not ages when RFID was first invented. But we saw in a lot of RFID deployments that on-premise server installation was a must. But now we see the industry moving towards a more cloud-based solution. So this is also helping us to eliminate the time component of having someone physically present to be installing when you can just scale up with the click of a button on a cloud solution. So we see that the industry is moving towards cloud, meaning every project is not necessarily starting fresh with new customizations. We typically customize through configuration. This also helps to eliminate a big time chunk. And in the past, we also needed RFID hardware at the point of sale to be able to enter a real-time scenario. So when I say real-time, what I mean is being able to understand where your products are within your store at any given moment. So in order to be able to do this successfully, you have to have RFID read points at numerous locations within the store, including at the point of sale. Well, now we see that customers or retailers are able to use existing hardware using a serialized barcode. So that serialized barcode is going to be able to give you that itemized data while utilizing the existing infrastructure. So you can now add a 2D data matrix to your labels or use an extended barcode without having to have that reader. We also saw in the past that the readers, like you saw in the video previously, they were very heavy. They were much more expensive. So they were not as easy to train and teach. But now what we're doing is we're coupling smart devices, which are needed for the RFID reader's operations, with a much lighter and easy to use reader. This is also making training significantly easier because, as we know, everyone already has a smart device on them. And they're even able to use those within the store when we're going through trainings, or we even have retailers that use it in their day-to-day operations. So on-premise trainings were the norm. But now we see that we're able to utilize e-learnings, much like the Zoom that we're on right now, and train the trainer has been really effective in some of the deployments that we've worked on. And with the need for less hardware for a more lightweight deployment, we coined something that we like to call the RFID in a box. It's really just coupling everything that you need all in one, which is a printer, an RFID reader, smart device, and some labels. You send that to your store with some e-learnings and you're able to get up and running very quickly.
Great, thank you, Madeline. And on the following pictures, we have some more examples. So here you see one of the newer devices that's definitely more lightweight and easy to use compared to the one you saw in the video with Tom. You can easily decouple or couple a smart device with it. And it also makes it more fun to use throughout the store. So in the second picture, you see one of the train-the-trainer sessions we've had with in one of our deployments. And you could ask here, who is the real RFID expert? Well, actually, even within a one-day training, they fully understand how to use the products nowadays because the products have become so much more user-friendly. So by now, they're all RFID experts in the store. And on the last picture, you see an example of RFID in a box where you can literally send a box, if you want, to your store with all the hardware. And from there, the store employee can already pick it up quite easily because it's so straightforward to use. And that's a really big change from a couple of years ago, and also making it much more easier to deploy faster and more effectively. Thank you, Madeline.
Thanks. Steffi, before we move on, I just want to ask a quick question to Danny. So you've had a lot of experience in different deployments with various customers. What do you see as the key limiting factor? What typically takes the longest?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in RFID still is to get the actual RFID labels on the products. Not because it's complicated, but just because it takes quite some time to apply the RFID labels in production, then wait before the products arrive in the store and before you can actually use RFID. Luckily, these days we see more and more brands like Nike and Adidas starting to source that themselves, which makes it a lot easier for retailers to adopt using RFID in the stores.
Cool, thanks, Danny.
Great to hear, Danny, thanks. And that actually leads us directly to you again, because we are now discussing why RFID might be invading the privacy of customers. Danny, you have quite some experience with that, so maybe you can guide us through.
Yeah, thank you. RFID invading privacy is one of the longest standing myths that we have seen with RFID. But before we're going to start talking, I'm going to launch a poll to get your opinion, what you believe is the most privacy invasion aspect of RFID. And you should be able to see the poll now on the screen. We basically have 4 options. The first one is the RFID labels are hidden to consumers. RFID labels store customer data in the chip. Point of sale data is connected to RFID data. Or you don't believe that RFID is invading customer privacy. Take a few more seconds before people have answered. Okay, still some. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. And what we can see is that actually most people don't believe that RFID is invading customer privacy, which of course is a good thing to have a positive attitude. There are still a few things that we need to be concerned about. The second option is that people worry that RFID labels store customer data in the chip. Well, that's a very easy myth to bust. Steffi, if you can go on to the next slide.
Yes.
Basically, the only information that's stored in an RFID label is the brand and product information, plus a unique serial number that distinguishes one blue shirt from another one. So there is no customer data stored in the RFID chip. It's also not necessary to connect any point of sale data towards RFID data. So once a customer is buying an item, there is no need to store information on that a specific customer has bought a specific item. I'll get back to the option of hidden RFID labels a bit later. So like I said, no customer information is stored in the RFID label. The RFID label information, so the brand and product information and unique item reference, still can be a privacy risk. Yeah, you can imagine somebody wearing an item with an embedded RFID tag. You can still read the item from several meters away, and you can still figure out the brand somebody is wearing. And that's a privacy invasion that should be avoided. The second thing is that because every RFID label contains a unique serial number, you can see if the same person enters a space. And this is also a privacy risk that should be avoided. Luckily, we have some easy methodologies to deal with those privacy risks. And in the next slide, we outline those 2 methodologies. The first one is the one that most retailers these days use, and it's actually a quite simple one. If you integrate the RFID label in the swing ticket, you're almost certain that as soon as the customer starts wearing the item, the RFID label is removed from the garment or product. And it basically means that as soon as the RFID label is removed, there is no privacy risk anymore. So this is an easy one. However, in some projects, it might be interesting to actually deeply integrate the RFID label into the product, for example, for loss prevention purposes. And when that's happening, it's not easy for the RFID label after it has been purchased. For those use cases, there's actually a methodology inside the RFID chip where you can reduce the reading distance from several meters back to several centimeters. And by reducing the reading distance this significantly, you also take away the privacy risk. This can be done at point of sale, and it can also be undone when the customer returns an item again to a store. So in this way, it makes it very efficient to start embedding RFID labels and still consider customer privacy. Another thing that's important is to always inform consumers that RFID is applied to products. And that can be simply done by just adding an RFID logo to the swing ticket or another label on the product. There's a lot more to tell about protecting customer privacy when deploying RFID, but these are some highlights and some introduction. If you have more questions, feel free to ask them, or we can answer them after the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And I noticed that the connectivity was sometimes a little bit off. So if you have more questions, feel free to answer them in the question box, and we can discuss them at the end of the webinar. And then now moving on to our last myth of today, which is RFID is expensive. And I'm sure Madeline has heard this question quite a lot. So hopefully you can guide us through why this is not the case.
Absolutely. I love this one. As a person in sales, I hear this all the time. Everyone always wants to know, okay, what's it going to cost me? But let's briefly dive into a quick poll. I want to just ask you guys, what do you think is the biggest expense factor of RFID? So as you're entering into your projects, what do you see as the biggest item on your budget? Is it hardware? Is it labels, software, or professional services? I'm curious what you guys think. Okay, we have a lot of responses coming in. So far, labels is the winner. Okay, we'll give you a couple more seconds. Almost everyone has voted. All right, let's share those results. So it looks like about 50% of you think labels is the most expensive piece. Okay, well, you might be right, but let's dive into these components a little bit deeper. So when we enter into a project and we're talking with retailers, we always put these first three components into a bucket. These are what you can expect to be paying for: your hardware, your software, and your labels. As we know, hardware is typically an RFID reader on a mobile device. Sometimes we also add a printer, depending on the labeling strategy that the retailer's chosen. We also have the software component, which can be as easy and simple as a download within the App Store, or a little bit more time-consuming with a server installation within the store. Then we also have labels. So when you're entering into a project, it's key that all items within the scope will also have an RFID label on them, whether these are deployed in the DC or in the stores. And then a fourth component that I wanted to add on today is shielding. So this is something that is sometimes overlooked when entering into a project. So what is shielding? Well, when we're doing an RFID scan, we want to know exactly where our products live within our store. And when we say exactly where, we also mean breaking that down by what we call sublocations. That means within your back of house or your front of house. So you want to know what's in your stock room versus your sales floor. This way you could be sure to replenish appropriately. But there's a critical zone there, because if you're reading on your sales floor during a count, I'm walking by, I might scan things that are on the other side of the wall, also in the sales floor. And then you're allocating items to the incorrect sublocation, which will be a little bit more difficult when you're working on in-store replenishment. So shielding is this beautiful metallic wallpaper that might be a little bit costly, Well, we want to explain that there are ways that you can eliminate this cost component. So if you're looking to eliminate that component, make sure you're working with a software provider that has virtual shielding or a virtually sophisticated way to solve this problem. Next week, we're actually hosting a webinar on virtual shielding. So if you're interested in learning more about it or you have more questions, feel free to ask in the Q&A, but we're also going to cover that next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. So in the same way we did with the deployment, I want to take a step back and also look at where we came from. So RFID is expensive. There is a big cost associated with RFID, but there are ways that you can decrease that. So we also saw that, previously a lot of server installations were necessary to successfully deploy RFID throughout the organization. Well, now we see that we're moving towards cloud-based platforms. So this means that we are taking away that need for maintenance and updates. Your service provider is going to take care of that for you. Entering into a cloud-based platform means that you are also on a payment plan that's software as a service. So you're paying per store per month, and your upfront fee, your upfront cost is much, much lower. We also can utilize existing hardware at the point of sale. This is also going to help us to bring that cost down. So meaning that we are using barcode readers, existing processes, so that we can help retailers to meet their goals of getting to, again, a real-time scenario. Be able to understand what goods are leaving the store or moving throughout the store. This is crucial. We also took a look at label prices and where we've came over the past 5 years. We've seen that we've decreased label prices by 50%. Danny actually wrote a blog post not too long ago about, is it realistic that we get down to the 1 cent RFID label? We're not there yet, but we think that it is a reality that we can get there. Also, I showed you in that video of Tom, the RFID readers. Well, that RFID reader was on retail for around $4,000. So now we're seeing that those costs are decreased by 70%. You can also buy these devices together. So you don't need to necessarily be buying a RFID reader and a smartphone, which activates the reader, separately. You can buy them as one. You can also consider letting your retail associates use their own smartphones. We have customers that are doing that. Or maybe you already use smart devices in your store for your point of sale or for other operations. So they're not being bought in bulk volume. I think another point just to note here is that moving towards a cloud-based solution means that you're really paying for the functionalities that you're using. If you're going to do a big organization-wide deployment, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your money. And with a cloud-based platform, you really can hone down on the functionalities that are most important, the functionalities that are going to help you to build the best ROI. So on this slide, we're talking a lot about how we're saving costs and what has changed, but I also want to highlight that with RFID, we don't see RFID as a cost savings. It's going to take more time, and it is an investment, but we really want to focus with you on building an ROI. So in an ideal scenario, you can usually pay back your RFID deployment within around 6 months. And that's because we see that we're increasing sales anywhere from 3 to 5%, especially in our pilots and absolutely within deployments. These are the numbers that we see time and time again. But it's all about the process and the way that you deploy RFID. Like I said previously, it's really important that you focus on the components that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And the way that we do that is we focus on increasing your accuracy. So you were previously able to do store inventories maybe once a year, twice, maybe even quarterly. That's great. Now you're able to do inventory counts once a week. So we're able to do those counts within an hour with your store associates. Now you know exactly where your products live, whether they're on the sales floor or in the back of house. And when we're able to understand that, we can make sure that we're always making the right products available for your customers and focus on replenishment. So when we say replenishment, it's a bit twofold. We mean from your distribution centers to your store, but also from your back of house to your front of house. And if we're making sure that we can always have those right products available, that we're displaying the best-selling products on your display wall, that's when we're going to increase that brand loyalty, that brand engagement, and we can switch on omnichannel. So a lot of retailers today, and especially now in the situation that we're in, we're talking about buy online, pick up in store, or ship from store. This is becoming crucial. So in order to do this, if we have the foundational building blocks of our accuracy, which is leading to our availability, well, then we say, now we're in a good position to increase our sales and enable omnichannel. So that's what I had prepared from an ROI cost component perspective. I have a lot of conversations with retailers in this topic. So if it's something that you have a question on, please just drop your question in the Q&A. We're going to spend some time on that in a little bit.
Thank you very much, Madeline. And indeed, now it's time for our Q&A. I already saw some questions coming in, but we want to give you some time to fill in, send in some more questions, so please do so. And in the meantime, I will close off this webinar by thanking you for participating. Next week, we will have another webinar on virtual shielding. Same time and same registration on our website, and you will also receive a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar that will also be posted on